It's always an honor to be able to share my experience, strength, and hope with other men, or anyone for that matter. I was just talking to Chuck at the beginning. I really don't deserve to be here, and it's a testament to God's grace and mercy, and just very thankful for the opportunity. If you guys don't mind, I would like to say a short prayer just to start off. Heavenly Father, just thank you for the opportunity to be here. I thank you for your mercy and your grace. I humbly ask that you open our hearts, our minds to have a new experience today. I pray that you use this as an opportunity to make much of you and less of me. I am thankful for the opportunity to be able to glorify you, and I ask these things humbly in your Son's precious name. Amen. So I'm going to start out with asking for you guys to use a little bit of imagination with me, if you don't mind. So I see a lot of golfers in the room, and let's just say that we're going on a golf trip, and we're going to a very prestigious golf course, and I'm driving. On the way there, the check engine light comes on, and that check engine light tells me that this car is overheating. And I look over and I see AJ, and I see how nervous he is because AJ has never missed a tee time in his life. So I know that I am responsible for doing something and doing something quick. So the car engine's overheating. I look over to the side of the road and I see a body of water with a boat ramp. I drive the car into the water. One would think that I fixed the problem, right? The engine was overheating. It needed some water. I cooled it off, right? Problem solved. Not exactly. My solution to fix that problem created a whole host of other issues. And let's just say, for example, in this imaginary story that I managed to get the car dried out and get it back on the road. What happens when I get it back on the road and start driving again? What happens? The engine overheats again. So I've treated a symptom of the problem, not the problem. Properly identifying a problem is the most critical step in finding a effective solution. Today, I'm going to invite each one of you to take an honest assessment of troublesome areas in your life, and not to shame you, but to discover a solution that actually works. Some examples of problems in our lives, or quote unquote problems: substance abuse, low self-esteem, anger, lust. I could go on. There's a whole host of things that we deal with on a daily basis. How many times have you heard somebody say, well, he has an anger problem, or he has a drug problem? Unfortunately, I used other people's assessments of my problem to determine how I was going to solve those problems. Have you ever tried telling someone that has an anger problem to just stop being angry? It's kind of like telling them to stop breathing. If you have an anger problem, how do you just stop getting angry? It is an exercise in futility, quite frankly, if we don't treat whatever it is as the underlying causes and conditions of what's going on. We fight the issue without ever really addressing what drives it, and we only deal with surface symptoms. And if we only deal with surface symptoms, we'll choose a surface solution that either is temporary, doesn't last, or doesn't work at all. To tell you a little bit about my story, which is important in all of this, I grew up actually here in Florence. I grew up in an upper middle class family, very loved. I never suffered any abuse. I never went to bed hungry. I never had to worry about if I was loved. I had, for all intents and purposes, I was spoiled. I was treated very well as a child, and I really had no excuses or reasons for bad behavior. One of my earliest memories, though, is that when I was growing up, one of the things that I noticed was I never really felt comfortable in my own skin. I didn't really know why I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. I just knew that when I was around other people, I didn't feel like I fit in. I was church growing up. It was something, we were regular church attendees. I went to children's groups and did all the things that quote unquote normal people do, but I never felt a connection with God. I was there for the social aspect. I was there because my parents made me be there. There was no connection or anything in me that wanted to be there on a personal level. One of my earliest memories of really, I guess, inadequacy or these types of feelings, and this is, the outline asked me to be genuine and and honest, so I'm going to be genuine and honest. So I had a sleepover whenever I was, I don't know, maybe 4th or 5th grade, and it was the first time I'd ever had a sleepover. Went to a friend's house. I used to sleepwalk really bad. I was a big talker in my sleep. I would get up in the middle of the night, walk around completely asleep, had no clue or any knowledge of what I was doing whenever I was sleeping. So during this sleepover, apparently something happened. I don't have any recollection of it, but I know that the following Monday when I get to school, I went to a small private school here, Burns Academy, back in the day when it was out in Quimby. Student body's a total of 200 kids. I got to school that Monday and nobody wanted to talk to me. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. Like, I would go to set my tray down at lunch and everybody would move to another table. It was a rough experience, to say the least. I later found out that my best friend who I'd spent the night with, apparently he had gone to school that Monday and told everyone that during the middle of the night, he woke up and I was rubbing his eyebrow. Now, again, because I don't recall any of this happening, I can neither confirm nor deny that I was rubbing said eyebrow, but nonetheless, I got to school the following Monday being labeled and called some names that were not very good. And for the better part of a half a year that year, I was treated like I was a leper or I had cancer. I was called gay. I was called all sorts of what kids do. And so, long story short, as hard as it is to admit, that moment in my life would shape the way I would live the rest of my life. I made up my mind that day or at that time that I never wanted to be in a situation where I was not accepted. I never wanted to feel the way that I did that day or at that time. And I would go to any length to ensure your approval of me, even if it meant compromising what little bit of moral ethics or integrity that I had. None of that mattered when it meant trying to garner attention or garner your acceptance. And, looking back, it's crazy that I allowed something so insignificant to shape how I would live the rest of my life. But the truth is I did. And, moving forward, you can imagine if you're going into interactions as a kid with that mindset or with that way of handling problems, if other people's acceptance of you is the only thing that makes you okay, then naturally being a hormonal teenager going through your adolescence and teenage years becomes increasingly difficult to handle. I like to use the analogy, if you can imagine like a very, very stout industrial spring, and imagine that spring being fully compressed all the time. And it is literally under tension 24/7. And that is the way that I live my life. I was under tension 24/7. There were periods that I didn't feel that way, but they were few and far between. And, naturally, whenever I was introduced to marijuana at 16, I found the relief in that spring sprung. I found the relief that I had gotten from the acceptance of other people or from outside myself. I found that relief, and I no longer had to work to obtain that acceptance. I could just take a drug and get the relief that I needed. And at that moment, I knew that I'd arrived. I'd gotten to a place to where I no longer had to worry about what you thought of me. I no longer had to worry about, all of the things that had been essentially causing me to be incapable of handling life and handling social aspects. And so naturally, whenever I got that feeling of relief and I wanted to feel that way all the time. By 18 years old, hard drugs had entered the picture. I'd love to tell you that I just stopped at marijuana. I don't know if you got the picture of the before and after.
There should be
Oh, it is? All right. How do I'm a typical guy. I can't do two things at one time. All right. So that's really the before and after. So like I was saying, I'd love to say I stopped at marijuana, but as you can see from that picture, I took it a few steps past that, because if it was just marijuana, I'd probably be 400 pounds in that picture, not 140 pounds. Hard drugs were in the picture by 18. I moved to Clemson after high school. Notice I said moved. I would love to say I attended school there, but I barely went to any classes. I was there, but just more from a party standpoint. I do recall social anxiety reaching another level whenever I got to Clemson. I don't really know what happened. I guess I was in an unfamiliar place compared to growing up here in small town Florence. I got there and I was not equipped to be able to handle life on life's terms. My drug and alcohol use really went to another level once I got there. And after a year of being there, the administration politely asked me not to come back. So I moved back to Florence to be with my family and work for the family business. And the reality is that no matter where I went, there I was. No location change was going to solve my problem. Anywhere I went, I still felt the same way. There was just really nothing that solved my issue or really treated my problem like drugs and alcohol did. There's a lot that goes on during this time that, some of it's fuzzy. I don't exactly remember. By 19 years old, I had met a girl and had started dating her. She had graduated from Rhodes College in Memphis, and one of my, I guess, solutions to try to fix my problem, like I said before, was to move. I thought a geographic cure would ultimately help me, because growing up in Florence, you tend to think that your location is your problem or your friends are your problem. But needless to say, I moved away. I moved to Memphis, and when I got to Memphis, there I was. So I found the same group of people in Memphis as I had that were friends in Florence. And, I was off to the races there. By 21 years old, I was already in an outpatient rehab and attending AA meetings. I was barely old enough to legally drink. And at this point, I'm already, other people are seeing a problem in me that I haven't quite seen yet. And so going to treatment was a way of keeping others off my back. And so I agreed to do that. I had started, fortunately, I was a very high functioning alcoholic and drug addict at this time. I'd started working for a bank whenever I was 20 years old, worked my way through the banking, retail banking, and then got into the mortgage business. Somehow, some way, I'm not quite sure how I held it all together, but I did manage to do that while all this other stuff was going on. But needless to say, my drinking and substance abuse was really beginning to show some consequences. But at this point, I was not really willing to acknowledge that. I maybe was willing to tell you that I shouldn't smoke crack cocaine, but smoking weed and drinking a beer every now and again was okay. So suffice to say, I had not really gotten to the point that I was willing to accept the fact that I really did have an issue. Fast forward a little bit, 24 years old. At this point, I've gotten married and divorced already. And I was in my first inpatient treatment facility in West Palm Beach, Florida. My wife at the time came down to Florida to have an in-person meeting with me to tell me that she was pregnant with our first child. And one would think, hearing the news of your firstborn child being conceived would be enough to make you want to straighten up. And unfortunately, that was not the case. I managed to come back home, and I, had the best of intentions as it related to getting sober. But really, at the end of the day, I was not equipped to be able to handle it. And quite frankly, was still in denial. And it was no more than 30 days after returning home from this inpatient facility that I started using again, all throughout my ex-wife's or then wife, ex-wife's pregnancy. My oldest daughter was born 2 days after I was kicked out of a treatment center in Oxford, Mississippi. It's not an easy thing for me to acknowledge. Not being there when I should have been there. There's a lot of shoulda, coulda, wouldas, but the addiction had a hold on me, and really, quite frankly, it was not up to me at that point or time to be able to be there for her. I was able to get to town just in time to see her born, but I had little contact with her after she was born, other than just being in and out of her life. Again, not very proud to say that, but quite frankly, it was the best thing for her because I was not capable of being the person that she needed me to be. By 25, I'm unemployable and I'm homeless in Memphis. For about 2 months, I relied on the kindness of others to allow me to sleep on their couches while I attempted to try to salvage and get my life back together. Needless to say, none of that worked. As long as I had an enabler, I was going to take advantage of it. I didn't have relationships. I took hostages. I essentially would use people up for as much as I could use them up until my welcome was worn out, and then I would go find someone else. Again, not real proud to say that, but that's my story. That's how I live my life. At the end of being homeless in Memphis, I had an AA sponsor at the time who was tired of seeing me struggle. He bought me a one-way bus ticket back to see my parents, or back to live with my parents back in South Carolina. So back home I go on a Greyhound bus. And, I like to say that a lot of my relapses throughout this process came as the result of getting my back problems fixed. And what I mean by that is, traditionally what I would do is I would get a job, I would clean up, I would, get my bills paid, I would catch up child support, I would get all the things back that I had lost due to addiction. And as soon as those things came back in my life, then I was back off to the races. So I got all my back problems fixed and got everything, out from under the pressure and the stress of having my life collapse and then turn around and do it again. And if you would have asked me at the time, why are you doing this? I wouldn't really be able to answer you because I didn't know. I didn't know at that point in time. I could recognize that I had an issue, but I didn't know how to solve this issue. By 29, I've been in 13 different treatment facilities all over the country. I've been an inpatient, outpatient. The only thing that had not happened at this point is I had no arrest, which is a miracle as far as I'm concerned, whenever you live the type of life that I lived. I guess God knew that at some point in time that my career in banking was the only way or pathway for me to be able to provide for my family. And thank the good Lord that I didn't have any arrest records, because otherwise I would not have been able to do that. But quite frankly, that's inconsequential considering that, having a career in banking really wasn't necessary or conducive to me having a successful life. Unfortunately, I tied my identity to that career for a long time. And when I was unemployable, I was unwilling at that time to take just any and every job, even though it meant that I might be able to supply for my family. I was unwilling to do that. And so, quite frankly, in order for me to start changing, I was going to have to become humble and willing to do whatever I had to do in order for that change to occur. At this point, back in South Carolina, I've gotten into another relationship with another woman, and my youngest daughter, Emma, was conceived. And the day that she was born, I had been smoking crack until 4 a.m. the night before and got the call at 5 a.m. that she had gone into labor. And I was able to drive down to the beach somehow, some way, just in time to see her born as well. But I say that, guys, because there's a pattern here. There's a pattern of lack of control and my inability to be there for the ones that I need to be loving and supporting because of my selfishness and because of my addiction. And I'll have to deal with those decisions for the rest of my life. But what's important is to know that God's grace covers that. No matter how much of an absentee father I was, no matter, the shortcomings that I had and the problems that I had being there for them, the reality is that I didn't know it at the time, but God would restore all of that. I missed a year of my youngest daughter's life fighting through the court system to try to show the court that I had changed. And it wasn't easy. There were times that I was asked to give up. There were times that I was asked to sign my rights away because that would be easier than just being a revolving door in my kids' lives. And there were times that I considered doing that. But thank the good Lord that I did not. His plan was far greater than what I had. And I'm so thankful that at some point I was able to see that there were others that had the same problem that I had. Obviously I've been in and out of recovery at this point. I've seen people that were like me, that I knew were like me. However, their lives had changed. The one thing that their lives had in common that mine didn't was that they had a relationship with God. I just didn't know how to bridge that gap between where I was and where they were. And fortunately, there was a very strong group of men that rallied around me and showed me that. I had to just be willing to follow suggestions and do what they asked me to do, which is not an easy thing to do when you're a man and you're supposed to have it all together. So I think it's safe to say I have a drug problem, right? So what's the solution to me having a drug problem? Stop. Would that make sense? I tried every imaginable, conceivable way to stop. I tried every imaginable way to control it. I tried just drinking when Clemson lost. I tried just drinking when Clemson won. I tried just drinking on Thursdays. I tried just smoking weed on Monday mornings. I tried every single possible combination that there was to try, but I had clearly crossed a line where drinking and drugging was no longer a choice. Left to my own devices, at some point, I may dry out for a little portion of time, but left to my own devices, I would eventually go back to the way I was living before because that's what I knew to do. That was the solution to treating my internal condition. Fortunately, I was able to see others that had recovered. And I want to be clear, I didn't wake up every day taking a drink or using a drug. I didn't use every day. But what I did have was I had a mind that obsessed over it, that told me this time will be different. If you do it this time, if you just do it this way, it won't end up like it did the last time. So I had a mind that obsessed over it, and I had a body that once it entered, all bets were off. There was no telling where I was going to end up or where I was going to stop. And so I was finally at a point of acknowledging the fact that abstinence was my only option. I, again, just didn't know how to get from where I was to where I needed to be. So fast forward, I'm around people that I can clearly see have an answer. I'm finally desperate enough that, I'm willing to follow suggestions. I can't tell you how many times I would pass out and then come to the next day swearing that I was not going to do what I had done the night before, only to be doing what I had done the night before by 5 o'clock. I knew that I couldn't quit on my own. I'd finally become willing to acknowledge that. On July 16th, 2011, I came to, and I say I came to because when you pass out, you don't wake up, you come to. I came to on that day with a very familiar black cloud hanging over me, as one that had been hanging over my head for years and years and years. I was getting evicted from where I was living. The repo man was looking for my car. And I'd been given an offer to go down to Charleston to try sobriety one more time. I prayed a prayer. I made a deal with God. I said, God, I am going to give sobriety and recovery one more shot. I'm going to give it everything that I've got. And if it doesn't work this time, I will kill myself before I put my family and everyone else that I know through another relapse. And I meant it. I was at a jumping off place. I was at a point where life had become unmanageable. I was unable to live the life that I was living. I wasn't able to do it anymore. So on July 16th, 2011, I had $80 to my name. I took whatever little bit of stuff I owned and put it in 2 trash bags and put it in the back of my car and did what any good drug addict would do. I calculated exactly how much gas I would need to get to Charleston. I bought $20 worth of gas and $60 worth of crack. And I smoked crack all the way down to Charleston that day, praying that it would be the last time that I had to do that. And thank the good Lord, it was the last time I had to do that. So 14 and a half years ago was the last time that I put a mood or mind-altering substance in my body. It's been a long road. But I can tell you on that day, the obsession to use drugs and alcohol was removed from me before I ever took the first step in AA. All God wanted from me was complete surrender. And that was the first time in my life that I could honestly point to, that I could say I was completely surrendered to God. If God would have told me, Kevin, you can stay sober if you rip all your clothes off and you run down Chevis Street naked, that will keep you sober, I was willing to do that.
Thank God he didn't.
Thank God he didn't, because there would have been a whole host of other problems. But had that been my instruction, that was the point that I was at and willing to go to in order not to use again. Unfortunately, there was a tremendous amount of wreckage in my life prior to getting to that point that God would want me to deal with, but that was not necessary at that time in order for him to take away the obsession. So what changed? Well, first thing was I had to acknowledge that my addiction was not my problem. It was my solution. It was the way that I handled life. It was the way that I dealt with all the feelings that I had of inadequacy, all of the stress, the anger, everything that life throws at us. I had to acknowledge that drugs and alcohol were my solution to that. Another thing that changed was over time, I started to surrender other areas of my life other than just drugs and alcohol. I can honestly say that in the beginning, whenever, I had really acknowledged that I had a problem with substances, I was willing to say, God, okay, you can take this addiction stuff, but I'm going to handle my romances, my finances, all the other areas that I feel like I need to be in control of. I'm going to take care of that, and you're over here behind the scenes taking care of this. And I treated God like a genie. I would just pull him out of the bottle whenever I needed him. And, gradually over time, I saw that he was calling me to surrender every area of my life. And I'd love to tell you that I've done that 100% of the time. I think we can all agree that's not possible to do that. There will be times that I will give it to God and I'll turn right around and I'll take it back. But I can say that over this period of time and trial and error, that I don't have to run the car into the ditch anymore. I'm really wanting to bring it back to the center line once I hit the rumble strips. I don't really have to completely go off the rails like I used to before I recognize that I'm getting in my will and not in God's will. Regular church attendance. I got plugged into a men's group down in Charleston whenever I first started getting sober down there. I was in Bible study 2 times a week. I was attending AA meetings. Literally, my life revolved around recovery for probably the first 9 months. I was willing to take a minimum wage job to have food. The repo man found my car, by the way. And I was fortunate enough to have a 22-year-old single cab Chevrolet that my brother was no longer driving, that he let me drive, that was well beneath me, but I was super happy to have it at the time. I either need to take the necessary steps to become humble, or I will humiliate myself. That is 100% always been the case for me. I'm actively involved today in my church, in the discipleship program that we have. Involved in several small men's groups that are necessary. Not, drinking and drugging is not my problem anymore. Living life on life's terms is my challenge. Doing it in a godly manner is my challenge. Getting rid of self is my challenge. I stand here today a free man. Not free from addiction, free from self, and free to know where my forever home is going to be. Regardless of anything that is said here today, in my eyes, is going to be deemed as a success. It's a success. It's nothing short of a miracle that I stand here today. I should not be here. I can go anywhere and do anything that I used to do. I can remember it. I still go to concerts. My wife and I went to Red Rocks, Colorado to see one of my favorite bands, and there was prolific alcohol consumption and drug use all over the place. And not that I advocate someone that's new in sobriety doing that. Obviously, I'm not, exactly new anymore. But however, the idea that I could be like other people has been smashed. nor do I want to be like other people. I'm able to play golf today without drinking. I'm able to do anything and everything that I used to enjoy doing without having a substance in my body. And the only way that that is possible is by way of God's grace and being willing to follow suggestions of people that came before me and were willing to lend me a helping hand. That's the only way. In the beginning, if you would have asked me to make a list of all the things that I would like to see happen in sobriety, if you'd have told me to just make a list, I would have shortchanged myself 1,000%. I can remember early on, all I wanted was my old life back. I can remember vividly praying, God, if you'll just give me my old life back prior to me feeling like I needed to use a substance to be okay. If you'll just give me that old life back, I'd be okay. And he's done far greater than that. He has given me a new life. He has restored me in ways that I could not even imagine back then. The relationships with my daughters that I have today, that's my oldest daughter's graduation. She wrote me a letter when she was 8 years old and told me she never wanted to see me again. And now I have a relationship with her today. I have a godly relationship with her today. She says she's proud of me today. And I don't deserve it. Because there was a time that she shouldn't be proud of me. So I've said a lot. What would be some of the key takeaways? If I were in your seat or anyone else that has the care to listen, what would be my key takeaways? Number one, I can't solve a problem that I don't properly identify. If I'm treating the symptom, I'm not going to get a proper solution. I'm going to waste resources. I'm probably going to make things worse in the process. So I have to properly identify the problem. Well, how do we do that? Well, part of, the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are taking inventory and looking at causes and conditions for why we do what we do or why we did what we did. And nobody that is not facing an impending crisis really wants to take an honest look at their lives. Unfortunately for me, it took those bad circumstances to make me willing to do that. And I thank God for it today. It's my greatest asset. It's my greatest asset. No matter how much trouble was caused, no matter how much fear and regret I have, it's my greatest asset. Because it was necessary to crush me and to put me in a posture to have a heart bent towards Christ. Had I not gone through that, had I just been successful at the game of life without having to go through any of this stuff, I would have zero need for God. Why? I can do it on my own. And unfortunately, even through some of that, I continue to think that. Self-will can't fix what self-will created. Countless times, I would find myself getting myself into a situation based on selfish decisions, selfish actions, and then I would turn around and try to get out of that situation with the same selfish mind that got me in it to start with. There has to come a point in the time that I stop thinking about me. I'm not much, but I'm all I ever think about. Real change comes by way of God, community, and spiritual action. There's an old saying, if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to keep getting what you always got. And, at the end of the day, I have to be willing to ask for help, and I have to be willing to ask for action when that help, I have to be willing to take action when that help comes. If I'm unwilling to do that, then I'm essentially throwing my hand up and saying, I've got this, and clearly I have a very strong track record of taking care of things. So practical application of this, taking an honest inventory of troublesome areas, identify whether you're treating a symptom or the actual problem. Identify a brother or a group of godly men that have experience with the issue that's troubling you, and be willing to ask for help and be willing to follow suggestions. Focus on establishing and strengthening a relationship with God, and the rest will take care of itself. I can't think of one area in my life that has not improved as the result of growing my relationship with God. The areas that I bombarded it with my self-will, did everything that I thought was best, are the areas that either went unchanged or got worse. Every area of my life that I've surrendered to God and been willing to follow suggestions on has markedly improved as the result of that relationship, and quite frankly, as a byproduct. If we're taught growing up, you can be anybody you want to be, you can do anything you want to do as long as you set your mind to it and you work hard, that belief system really goes awry whenever you try to apply that to these situations. Surrender has such a negative connotation to it in our day and age, and it's a tragedy. Surrender is such a sweet thing. If I want to win, if I want to be successful, even though it may not look like what I want success to look like, surrender is necessary. And if I'm not willing to acknowledge that, then I'm just going to go back to the way things were before. Thank you so much for allowing me to share.